The heart monitor's steady beeping was the only sound keeping me tethered to this world. Through the haze of medication and pain, I could hear voices drifting in and out of my consciousness, like ghosts haunting my hospital room. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the words that would destroy everything I believed about my daughter's love. "Don't try so hard, doctor. She's lived long enough." Those 7 words, whispered in what Sarah thought was my unconscious state, pierced through my chest like a dagger made of pure betrayal. My name is Helen Brooks. I'm 60 years old, and I live in Bristol, England. For the past 3 days, I had been fighting for my life after a massive heart attack that struck me down in my own kitchen while preparing Sunday dinner, a tradition I'd maintained religiously for 35 years. Sarah, my only daughter, my precious child whom I had raised alone after her father abandoned us when she was just 8 years old, stood beside my hospital bed. The same daughter for whom I had worked 3 jobs to pay for her university education at Oxford. The same daughter to whom I had given my life savings of $150,000 to help her buy her dream house in Clifton. The same daughter who was now suggesting to Dr. Morrison that he shouldn't exhaust himself trying to save my life. I felt my hands clench the hospital sheets with such force that my knuckles turned white beneath the thin blanket. Every muscle in my body screamed with rage, but I kept my eyes firmly shut, my breathing steady, playing the part of the unconscious patient while my world crumbled around me. How could the child I had loved unconditionally, the girl I had protected from every storm, be standing there discussing my death as if it were a mere inconvenience? Dr. Morrison's response was sharp and professional. "Mrs. Thompson, I must remind you that your mother's recovery is very much possible. She's responding well to treatment, and her vitals are stabilizing. We never give up on our patients here." "Of course, doctor," Sarah replied, her voice dripping with false concern. "I just meant that if she's suffering, well, maybe it's kinder to let nature take its course. She's had a good life, hasn't she?" A good life? My heart, already damaged and struggling, felt like it might stop entirely from the emotional devastation. Had she forgotten the countless nights I spent working as a night cleaner at the office buildings downtown, coming home at dawn with aching bones and swollen feet, just to ensure she could have the school supplies she needed? Had she forgotten how I sold my grandmother's antique jewelry, worth $25,000, to pay for her wedding to Marcus, that pompous investment banker who looked down on me from the moment they met? The irony wasn't lost on me that I was lying in a cardiac unit while experiencing the greatest heartbreak of my life. For 6 decades, I had believed that a mother's love was unconditional and reciprocal. I had built my entire existence around the assumption that the sacrifices I made for Sarah would be appreciated, if not fully understood. Now, listening to her casual dismissal of my life, I realized how monumentally wrong I had been. As the days passed in that sterile hospital room, with Sarah visiting dutifully but briefly, I began to see her differently. The way she checked her expensive watch during our conversations, the impatience in her voice when I asked about her life, the cold efficiency with which she handled the medical staff's questions about my care. She was already planning my funeral, already calculating what she might inherit. But Sarah had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated her mother's strength and determination. The same woman who had raised her alone, who had fought through poverty and exhaustion to give her every opportunity, was not going to quietly fade away just because it would be convenient for her ungrateful daughter. When Dr. Morrison gave me the news that I could go home in a week, I smiled for the first time since entering the hospital. Not because I was happy about my recovery, but because I had a plan forming in my mind, a plan that would teach Sarah exactly what kind of woman she had tried to bury prematurely. If you're following this story and want to see how I turn the tables on my daughter, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love connecting with viewers from around the world who understand that family betrayal cuts the deepest. The morning of my discharge, I sat on the edge of my hospital bed, watching Sarah fidget with her designer handbag while avoiding eye contact. She had arrived 20 minutes late, claiming traffic delays, though I suspected she had been hoping the doctors might have more bad news to share. The irony of hoping your own mother might take a turn for the worse wasn't lost on me. "Are you sure you're ready to go home, Mum?" she asked, her voice carrying that same false concern I had grown to recognize over the past week. Maybe you should stay another few days, just to be safe. Dr. Morrison, bless his professional soul, had already explained 3 times that my recovery was remarkable for someone my age. My heart was healing beautifully, my blood pressure had stabilized, and there was no medical reason to keep me hospitalized. But Sarah seemed determined to find excuses to delay my return to the world of the living. "I'm perfectly fine, darling," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath the surface. "In fact, I'm looking forward to getting back to my normal routine. Perhaps I'll even start taking those watercolor classes I've been putting off." The mention of future plans seemed to genuinely irritate her. Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and I caught her exchanging a meaningful glance with Marcus, who had finally deigned to show up for my discharge. My son-in-law stood near the window, scrolling through his phone with the dedication of a man who had more important places to be. During the drive home to my modest terraced house in Redland, I listened to their conversation about their upcoming anniversary trip to the Maldives. The vacation would cost them $8,000, according to Marcus's boastful commentary, and they were planning to extend it to 3 weeks because Sarah desperately needed the break from all the stress. What stress? I wondered silently. The stress of visiting your dying mother for 30 minutes each day? The stress of pretending to care whether she lived or died? As we pulled into my driveway, I noticed how quickly they wanted to deposit me and leave. Sarah helped me to my front door with the efficiency of a postal worker delivering a package, while Marcus remained in the car with the engine running. "Will you be all right on your own?" Sarah asked, already stepping backward toward the car. "I could arrange for a home care nurse if you think you need one." The suggestion of a stranger caring for me instead of my own daughter might have hurt if I hadn't already heard her true feelings. Instead, it simply reinforced my growing determination to show her exactly what she had lost through her callousness. "No need, sweetheart. I'm stronger than you think," I replied, and for the first time in a week, I meant every word. That evening, alone in my quiet house, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my favorite armchair, the one I had saved for months to buy when Sarah was a teenager. The silence felt different now, not lonely, but contemplative. I had spent the entire car ride formulating my plan, and now it was time to put it into action. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I had memorized 20 years ago, but never thought I would use. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Jenkins, Hartley and Associates, Legal Services. Good evening. This is Helen Brooks. I'd like to schedule an appointment with Mr. Hartley to discuss updating my will." The secretary's voice was professionally cheerful. "Certainly, Mrs. Brooks. Mr. Hartley has an opening tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock. Would that suit you?" "Perfect," I replied, already feeling a sense of satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. "Please tell him it's regarding a complete revision of my estate planning, and please mention that it's quite urgent." After hanging up, I walked slowly through my house, looking at each room with new eyes. The piano I had bought for Sarah when she was 12, even though it meant eating beans on toast for 2 months. The dining room set I had purchased when she brought Marcus home for the first time, wanting to impress his upper-class family. The photographs covering every surface, documenting a lifetime of love that I now realized had been painfully one-sided. Tomorrow would begin the most important week of my life. Not because I was recovering from a heart attack, but because I was finally going to teach my daughter the true cost of taking a mother's love for granted. She wanted me gone. She would get her wish, but not in the way she expected. The woman who had whispered to a doctor about letting nature take its course was about to discover that sometimes nature has other plans entirely. Mr. Hartley's office smelled of leather-bound books and decades of life-changing decisions. As I sat across from his mahogany desk, I felt a calmness I hadn't experienced since before my heart attack. This distinguished gentleman in his 70s had handled my financial affairs for nearly 2 decades, and his expression grew increasingly concerned as I explained the reason for my urgent visit. "Mrs. Brooks, I must ask, are you absolutely certain about these changes?" His weathered hands held my existing will, which left everything to Sarah. "This represents a complete reversal of your previous wishes. Your daughter stands to lose an inheritance worth approximately $380,000, including your house, savings, and investments." The number hung in the air between us like an accusation. £380,000. Money I had accumulated through decades of careful saving, smart investments with my modest teacher's pension, and the life insurance payout from my late husband's policy. Money that Sarah had always assumed would automatically become hers. "I'm completely certain, Mr. Hartley," I replied, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was doing. "I want to establish the Helen Brooks Foundation for Single Mothers, to be administered by the charity trustees I've selected. Every penny of my estate will go toward helping women who are struggling to raise their children alone, just as I once did." Mr. Hartley removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a gesture I recognized as his way of processing difficult news. "Mrs. Brooks, might I suggest a cooling-off period? Perhaps a provision that allows you to reconsider? Family disputes often—" "There's no dispute, Mr. Hartley," I interrupted gently. "My daughter made her feelings about my continued existence quite clear. She believes I've lived long enough, so I'm simply ensuring that my money goes to people who will appreciate its value." I reached into my handbag and withdrew a folder containing documents I had spent the morning organizing. "I've researched 3 charities in Bristol that support single mothers. I want the foundation to provide emergency financial assistance, educational scholarships, and housing deposits. The same kind of help I could have used 30 years ago." As Mr. Hartley reviewed my proposals, I thought about the countless women who were currently lying awake at night, worried about rent payments and school fees, just as I had done when Sarah was young. They would benefit from the money that my daughter had spent years assuming would fund her comfortable lifestyle. "The changes will take effect immediately upon signing," Mr. Hartley explained, his professional demeanor returning. "However, I strongly recommend that you inform your daughter of these modifications. The shock of discovering this well, it could be quite devastating." I almost laughed at his choice of words. Devastating? Sarah had already devastated me with her casual cruelty. Now she would learn what devastation felt like from the receiving end. "Actually, Mr. Hartley, I have a specific plan for how my daughter will learn about these changes, but I want you to prepare a sealed letter explaining the new will, to be delivered to her only after a particular event occurs." His eyebrows rose with curiosity. "What kind of event?" "Sarah believes I should have died in that hospital. She's going to get the chance to see what her life would look like if her wish had come true." I opened my handbag again and withdrew a piece of paper with my daughter's address written in my careful handwriting. "In exactly 1 week, I want you to hand-deliver this letter to her home. Tell her it's regarding my estate and that she should read it immediately." "Mrs. Brooks, I'm not sure I understand." "You will, Mr. Hartley. Trust me, you will." After signing the new will and the associated documents, I felt as though a tremendous weight had been lifted from my chest. For the first time since my heart attack, my breathing felt completely clear. The woman who had spent 6 decades putting her daughter's needs before her own had finally learned to prioritize her own values. Walking home through the autumn streets of Bristol, I passed a young mother pushing a stroller while carrying heavy shopping bags. She looked exhausted, overwhelmed, and heartbreakingly familiar. In her face, I saw myself at 30, struggling to balance work and motherhood with no support system and no financial security. That woman, and thousands like her, would benefit from the foundation I was creating. They would receive the help I had never had, funded by money that had been earned through the same struggles they were experiencing. It felt like the most meaningful thing I had ever done. Sarah could keep her expensive handbags, her luxury vacations, and her cold-hearted husband. What she couldn't keep was the financial safety net she had taken for granted while wishing for my death. The irony was perfect. In trying to bury me, she had instead buried her own future. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose that surprised me with its intensity. Today would begin the most important performance of my life, and I intended to make it worthy of the West End. I dressed carefully in my favorite blue dress, the one Sarah always said made me look younger, and applied makeup with the precision of a woman preparing for a significant occasion. My first stop was Sarah's house in Clifton, the elegant Victorian property I had helped her purchase with my $150,000 contribution. As I walked up the familiar garden path, lined with the roses I had helped her plant 2 years ago, I could see her through the kitchen window, sipping coffee while scrolling through her tablet. I rang the doorbell and waited, my heart beating steadily and strongly, a remarkable contrast to the irregular rhythm that had characterized the past weeks. When Sarah opened the door, Her expression shifted from surprise to poorly concealed annoyance. "Mom, what are you doing here so early? Shouldn't you be resting?" "Oh, darling, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about our conversation yesterday, about how worried you've been about me." I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, noting how she reluctantly moved aside. "I realized I haven't been fair to you, putting you through all this stress." Sarah's confusion was visible as she followed me into her pristine living room, the same room where I had spent last Christmas morning, watching her unwrap the expensive jewelry I had bought her while she complained about the color of the wrapping paper. "I don't understand, Mom. What conversation? About how maybe it would be better if I didn't have to struggle through this recovery." I sat down on her cream-colored sofa, the one that cost more than I had earned in 3 months of cleaning offices. "You're absolutely right, of course. Why should I put us both through the difficulty of this rehabilitation when the outcome is so uncertain?" The color drained from Sarah's face. "Mom, I never said, not in so many words perhaps, but I could see it in your eyes. The burden I've become, the inconvenience of my medical needs." I reached over and patted her hand with what I hoped appeared to be maternal understanding. "It's perfectly natural, darling. I've lived my life, haven't I?" Sarah began stammering denials, but I could see the panic building behind her eyes. She was realizing that her private conversation with Dr. Morrison might not have been as private as she had assumed. "I've been thinking about it all night," I continued, my voice taking on a dreamy quality that I had practiced in front of my bedroom mirror. "Maybe I should just stop fighting so hard. Stop taking all these medications that make me feel terrible. Stop forcing my poor old heart to keep working when it's clearly ready to rest." "Mom, please don't talk like that. Of course you should keep taking your medications." "Should I, though?" I tilted my head as if genuinely considering the question. "Yesterday you seemed quite philosophical about my situation. Something about how I'd had a good life, how maybe it was time to let nature take its course." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and I could practically see her mind racing to calculate whether I had actually heard her conversation with the doctor. "I think," I said slowly, standing up from the sofa, "that I should go home and really consider what's best for everyone involved. After all, I wouldn't want to be a burden on my precious daughter." I walked toward the door, noting how Sarah followed behind me with increasing agitation. As I reached for the handle, she grabbed my arm with more force than was necessary. "Mom, wait. You're not thinking clearly. The heart attack, the medications, they're affecting your judgment. You need to keep taking care of yourself." I turned back to her with what I hoped was a sad, resigned smile. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. I finally understand exactly where I stand with the people I love most." As I walked away from her house, I could feel Sarah watching me from the window. I maintained my slow, defeated pace until I was out of sight, then allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. The first act of my performance had gone exactly as planned. The woman who had whispered about letting nature take its course was about to discover that sometimes nature needs a little assistance, and sometimes that assistance comes in the form of a mother's perfect revenge. By evening, my phone had rung 17 times. Sarah's increasingly frantic voicemails filled my answering machine with a symphony of guilt and desperation that would have been music to my ears if the situation weren't so heartbreaking. Each message revealed a little more of her growing panic as she realized the implications of what she thought she had heard. "Mom, please call me back. I'm worried about you. Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding about our conversation earlier. Mom, Marcus thinks I should come over to check on you. Please pick up." The final message, left at nearly midnight, was the most telling. "Mom, I love you. Please don't do anything rash. We can talk about whatever you think you heard at the hospital." Whatever I think I heard. Even now, caught in her own web of guilt, Sarah couldn't bring herself to acknowledge what she had actually said. But her admission that there was something to have heard confirmed everything I needed to know. The next morning, I continued my performance with Act 2. I called Dr. Morrison's office and, speaking in a voice carefully modulated to sound frail and defeated, requested an appointment to discuss end-of-life options. The receptionist, clearly uncomfortable with the request, scheduled me for that afternoon and suggested I bring a family member for support. Perfect. I called Sarah immediately afterward. "Darling, I have an appointment with Dr. Morrison this afternoon. I was hoping you might come with me to discuss my situation." Your situation? Sarah's voice was sharp with anxiety. What kind of situation? Oh, the medications, the recovery process, whether it's all worth putting everyone through. I paused for maximum effect. I've been thinking about what you said about letting nature take its course, and I believe you might be right. The sound Sarah made was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Mum, I never said anything like that. You're misremembering. Am I? I allowed confusion to color my voice. I could have sworn. But then again, my memory hasn't been quite right since the heart attack. Dr. Morrison warned me that might happen. I'll pick you up at 1:30, Sarah said quickly. And Mum, don't make any decisions without talking to me first, all right? When Sarah arrived to collect me, I noted that she looked as though she hadn't slept. Her usually perfect makeup was hastily applied, and her hands shook slightly as she helped me into her BMW, the same car she had bought with the bonus from her marketing job, the job she had only been able to take because I had provided free childcare for her twin boys during their preschool years. Mum, about yesterday, she began as we drove toward the medical center. I think you might have misinterpreted something I said. The stress of your illness, the medications, they can affect how we process information. I turned to study her profile as she navigated traffic. You think I'm becoming confused? Losing my mental faculties? No, that's not what I meant. Sarah's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I just think that maybe you heard something that sounded different from what was actually said. So you didn't have a conversation with Dr. Morrison about my prognosis? Well, yes. And you didn't express any opinions about my treatment or recovery? Sarah's silence was answer enough. At the medical center, Dr. Morrison greeted us with professional warmth, though I could see the concern in his eyes when I explained my request to discuss palliative care options. Sarah sat rigid in the chair beside me, her face pale with undisguised panic. Mrs. Brooks, I must say I'm surprised by this request, Dr. Morrison said carefully. Your recovery has been excellent. There's no medical reason to consider palliative care at this time. But there might be personal reasons, I replied softly. My daughter and I have been discussing the burden my continued care might place on the family. Dr. Morrison's sharp glance at Sarah didn't go unnoticed. Mrs. Thompson, is this something you've discussed with your mother? Sarah's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. Not exactly, Doctor. I think there's been a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? I asked innocently. The appointment continued for another 20 minutes, with Dr. Morrison firmly rejecting any suggestion that I was a candidate for anything other than continued recovery. By the time we left his office, Sarah was visibly shaking. As we sat in her car in the parking garage, she finally broke down completely. Mom, I never meant for you to die. I swear I never meant that. I turned to face her fully, allowing my mask to slip just enough for her to see the steel beneath my apparent frailty. But you did say it, didn't you, Sarah? You told the doctor not to try so hard because I had lived long enough. The confession came out in a rush of tears and explanations about stress and fear and not thinking clearly. But nothing she said could undo the fundamental truth that she had been prepared to let me die rather than deal with the inconvenience of my recovery. I understand now, darling, I said quietly, and I want you to know that I'm not angry. I'm just tired. Tired of fighting when the people I love most would prefer I didn't. As we drove home in silence, I reflected on how perfectly my plan was proceeding. Sarah was learning what it felt like to face the loss of someone you had taken for granted. Soon, she would discover that sometimes lessons come with a price that can never be repaid. 1 week later, at precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Mr. Hartley stood at Sarah's front door, holding the sealed envelope that would change everything. I watched from my car parked across the street, my heart beating steadily as I prepared to witness the moment my daughter's world collapsed. Through her front window, I could see Sarah reading the letter, her face transforming from curiosity to confusion to horror as she absorbed the contents. The document Mr. Hartley had delivered was a copy of my new will, along with a letter I had written explaining my decision. My dear Sarah, if you are reading this letter, it means that Mr. Hartley has informed you of the changes I have made to my will. You are probably shocked to discover that you will no longer inherit my estate, which has been valued at $380,000. Instead, every penny will go to establish the Helen Brooks Foundation for Single Mothers. I want you to understand that this decision was not made in anger, but in clarity. While lying in that hospital bed, fighting for my life, I heard you tell Dr. Morrison that he shouldn't try so hard to save me because I had lived long enough. Those words showed me exactly how little value you place on my life. For 35 years, I sacrificed everything for you. I worked 3 jobs to put you through university. I gave you $150,000 toward your house. I sold my grandmother's jewelry to pay for your wedding. I provided free childcare for your children. I did all of this because I believed that a mother's love should be unconditional. But love, I have learned, should flow both ways. And your willingness to let me die rather than face the inconvenience of caring for an aging parent has shown me that my love was wasted on someone incapable of returning it. The foundation will help women who are struggling as I once struggled, women who understand the value of every day they are given and every opportunity they receive. They will appreciate what you have taken for granted. By the time you read this letter, the legal documents have already been filed and cannot be reversed. You made it clear that you thought I had lived long enough. Now you can see what your life would look like if you had gotten your wish. Perhaps this will teach you to value what you have while you still have it. Your mother, Helen Brooks. I watched as Sarah stumbled backward from her door, the letter clutched in her trembling hands. Through the window, I could see her sink onto her sofa, her face buried in her hands as the full magnitude of what she had lost began to register. My phone rang within minutes. "Mum!" Sarah's voice was hysterical, broken by sobs. "Please, you have to listen to me. This letter, this will, it's not fair. I never wanted you to die. I was scared. I was confused. I didn't mean what I said to the doctor. But you did say it, didn't you?" I replied calmly. "You stood beside my bed and told a medical professional that he shouldn't work too hard to save my life. I was terrified. I thought I was going to lose you, and I wasn't thinking clearly. People say things they don't mean when they're scared. Do they, Sarah? Do loving daughters really tell doctors not to try so hard when their mothers are dying?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air, because I think that when people are scared and not thinking clearly, their true feelings come out, and your true feeling was that it would be easier if I were dead. That's not true. I love you, Mum. Please, we can fix this. I'll take care of you. I'll do whatever you need. Just please don't take away my inheritance. The word inheritance hit me like a slap. Even now, even in her desperation, Sarah was more concerned about losing money than about losing her mother. She had just confirmed everything I believed about her priorities. There's nothing to fix, darling. You wanted me gone, and now, financially speaking, I am gone. The money you were counting on will go to people who actually need it, not to fund your luxury vacations and designer handbags. But Mum, that money was supposed to be for my children's future, for their education, for their security. The same children you never brought to visit their grandmother in the hospital, the same children whose care I provided for free for 3 years while you built your career. I felt my voice growing stronger, more confident. Perhaps you should have thought about their future before you decided their grandmother had lived long enough. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute before Sarah spoke again, her voice now cold and calculating. "This is cruel, Mum. You're punishing me for a moment of weakness, for words spoken in fear. Is this really how you want to end our relationship?" "I'm not ending anything, Sarah. I'm simply showing you what you asked for. You believed I had lived long enough, so I'm giving you the chance to experience what your life would be like without me in it, financially at least." After hanging up, I sat in my car for another hour, watching as Sarah paced frantically through her house, presumably making phone calls to lawyers, to Marcus, to anyone who might help her reverse what I had done. But Mr. Hartley had been thorough. The will was ironclad, the foundation was established, and the legal mechanisms were already in motion. Sarah could contest it, of course, but she would discover that my mind was perfectly sound and my decision was legally unassailable. For the first time since my heart attack, I felt completely, genuinely at peace. The next 2 weeks brought a barrage of attempts to change my mind that would have been impressive if they hadn't been so transparently manipulative. Sarah launched what could only be described as a campaign to win back her inheritance, employing tactics that revealed the depth of her desperation and the shallowness of her character. First came the guilt offensive. She arrived at my house every morning with elaborate breakfast preparations, chattering nervously about memories from her childhood while trying to avoid any mention of the will. She brought photo albums filled with pictures of us together, pointing out moments of apparent happiness while carefully editing out any reference to the financial sacrifices those moments had required. "Remember this, Mum?" she would say, showing me a picture of her university graduation. This was such a special day for both of us. What she didn't mention was that I had worked double shifts for 2 years to pay her tuition fees, or that I had worn the same dress to every important event in her life because I couldn't afford new clothes after funding her education. When the guilt campaign failed to produce results, Sarah moved on to medical manipulation. She arrived one afternoon with Dr. Morrison's receptionist's phone number, insisting that I needed a psychiatric evaluation to ensure I was mentally competent to make legal decisions. "The heart attack could have affected your judgment, Mom. It's common for people to make irrational decisions after major medical events." The doctor said so himself. I listened to her concerns with the patience of someone who had already anticipated this argument. "Did he really say that, Sarah? Because when I called his office this morning to clarify, he told me that he had said no such thing to you. In fact, he expressed concern that you seemed to be questioning my mental capacity without any medical basis." The color drained from her face as she realized her lie had been exposed. But rather than apologizing, she doubled down with increasing desperation. "Fine. Maybe he didn't say it exactly like that, but we both know that you're not thinking clearly. This foundation, this charity, it's not you, Mum. You've never cared about strangers more than your own family, haven't I?" I set down my teacup and looked at her directly. "Then perhaps you don't know me as well as you thought. Perhaps the person you thought was your mother was actually just a convenient source of financial support." The third week brought the family intervention. Marcus finally emerged from his usual state of detached superiority to join Sarah in what they clearly hoped would be a coordinated assault on my resolve. They arrived together on a Sunday afternoon, armed with a folder full of documents and expressions of grave concern. "Helen," Marcus began, using the patronizing tone he typically reserved for his subordinates at the investment firm, "Sarah and I have been consulting with some financial advisors about your situation. We think you may not fully understand the tax implications of this foundation you've established." I almost laughed at his presumption. "Please, Marcus, enlighten me about these tax implications." He launched into a complicated explanation involving inheritance tax, capital gains, and charitable deductions that was clearly designed to confuse rather than inform. But I had spent the past month working with Mr. Hartley to understand every aspect of my decision, and I knew more about the financial details than Marcus realized. "That's fascinating," I said when he finished his presentation. "However, you've made several significant errors in your calculations. The foundation is structured as a charitable trust, which means it's exempt from inheritance tax. Additionally, the donation provides substantial tax benefits that actually increase the effective value of the gift." Marcus's confident expression faltered as he realized that the woman he had always dismissed as financially naive had outmaneuvered him completely. "Furthermore," I continued, "I notice that your concerns are entirely focused on the financial impact to Sarah, not on the charitable benefits to the women who will receive help. That tells me everything I need to know about your true motivations." Sarah tried one final approach, bringing the grandchildren. My twin grandsons, now 8 years old, arrived with carefully coached speeches about how much they would miss their inheritance, though they called it their college fund, in the innocent way that children repeat adult conversations they don't fully understand. "Grandma Helen," little James said, reading from a note card Sarah had obviously prepared, "Mummy says that you're giving our college money to strangers. Don't you want us to go to university like Mummy did?" The manipulation was so transparent, so cruel in its use of innocent children, that I felt my last vestige of sympathy for my daughter evaporate completely. "Of course I want you to go to university," I told the boys gently. "But I also want you to learn that money isn't something you're entitled to simply because you're related to someone who has it. Your parents have good jobs and can save for your education the same way I saved for your mother's." After they left, I sat in my quiet house and marveled at how completely I had misjudged the people I thought I knew best. The daughter I had raised to be kind and grateful had become manipulative and entitled. The son-in-law I had tolerated for her sake had revealed himself to be calculating and condescending. Even my precious grandchildren were being used as weapons in a battle over money they had never earned. But the most important revelation was about myself. For the first time in 6 decades, I was making decisions based on my own values rather than on other people's expectations, and it felt absolutely liberating. While Sarah continued her desperate attempts to reclaim her lost inheritance, I threw myself into the work of establishing the Helen Brooks Foundation with an energy that surprised even me. The irony wasn't lost on me that my daughter's betrayal had given me the most meaningful purpose I had ever discovered. My first meeting with the charity trustees took place in a small conference room at the Bristol Community Center. I had carefully selected 3 women whose backgrounds resonated with my own experience. Margaret Foster, a former single mother who had built a successful accounting firm after raising 2 children alone. Dr. Priya Patel, a social worker who specialized in family crisis intervention. And Jennifer Walsh, a solicitor who provided legal aid to low-income families. Mrs. Brooks, Margaret said as we reviewed the foundation documents, I have to say that this is one of the most comprehensive charitable trusts I've ever seen. The initial endowment of $380,000 will allow us to help dozens of families immediately, and if we invest wisely, we can sustain this work for decades. Dr. Patel nodded enthusiastically. The need is certainly there. In my work, I see women every day who are one emergency away from homelessness, one missed paycheck away from losing their children to the care system. This foundation could literally save lives. As we discussed the specifics of how the money would be distributed, I felt a satisfaction that was entirely different from anything I had experienced as a mother or grandmother. This wasn't about obligation or expectation. It was about choice, about using my resources to create genuine positive change in the world. I want the first grants to go to women in situations similar to what I faced 30 years ago, I explained. Single mothers working multiple jobs, struggling to pay for childcare while they try to build careers. Women who need emergency funds for medical bills, car repairs, school supplies, the kinds of unexpected expenses that can derail an entire family's stability. Jennifer pulled out a folder of applications that social services had already forwarded to us. We have 43 requests for assistance, ranging from $200 for emergency groceries to $5,000 for housing deposits. Every single story is heartbreaking. I spent the next hour reading through the applications, and each one transported me back to my own darkest moments as a young mother. There was Lisa, a 28-year-old nurse who needed $800 to repair her car so she could continue working night shifts while her ex-husband provided no support. There was Amanda, a 35-year-old teacher who needed $200 to cover childcare costs while she completed additional qualifications to increase her salary. Can we help all of them? I asked. Margaret smiled. With the interest income and careful management, we can help these 43 women immediately and have funds available for at least 20 more cases this year. As I signed the checks that would change these women's lives, I thought about Sarah's accusation that I was giving money to strangers instead of family. But these women didn't feel like strangers. They felt like the family I had never had, connected by shared experiences of struggle and determination. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Lisa, the nurse whose car repair we had funded. Mrs. Brooks, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. I was about to lose my job because I couldn't get to work reliably. Your foundation just saved my entire family's future. You don't need to thank me, dear, I replied. Just promise me that when you're in a position to help someone else, you'll remember this feeling and pass it forward. That evening, I called Mr. Hartley to discuss establishing a larger endowment for the foundation. Mrs. Brooks, are you considering additional donations beyond your estate? He asked. I'm considering everything, Mr. Hartley. I have some savings that I had been keeping for emergencies, about $45,000. I realize now that other people's emergencies might be more important than my own comfort. That's very generous, but are you certain you want to donate your entire liquid savings? What if you need money for your own care as you age? I thought about his question seriously. Mr. Hartley, I'm 60 years old and in good health despite my recent heart attack. I have a comfortable pension and a paid-off house. The money I'm sitting on could transform dozens of lives right now, rather than sitting in my account earning minimal interest while I worry about hypothetical future needs. And if your daughter contests the will, legal fees could be substantial. Let her contest it. The will is solid, my mental capacity is documented, and I have witnesses to her statement in the hospital. Besides, watching her spend thousands of pounds on lawyer fees while the foundation helps actual people in need seems like perfect poetic justice. The next morning brought news that proved my prediction correct. Sarah had indeed hired a solicitor to contest the will, claiming that I had been mentally compromised by my heart attack and manipulated by unscrupulous advisors. The irony that she was spending her own money to try to reclaim money I had earned was not lost on me. But more importantly, the Bristol Evening Post had picked up the story of the foundation's launch. The headline read, "Local woman establishes $400,000 charity for single mothers after near-death experience changes perspective." The article included quotes from some of the women we had already helped, and the response was overwhelming. By noon, we had received 23 new applications for assistance, 5 offers from local businesses to provide matching funds, and inquiries from 3 other women who wanted to establish similar foundations. "Mom," Sarah's voice on the phone was tight with barely controlled fury. "Have you seen the newspaper?" "Yes, dear." "Isn't it wonderful? The foundation is already making a real difference in people's lives." "This is humiliating. Everyone in Bristol now knows that you've disinherited your own daughter to give money to strangers. People are talking about our family, making assumptions about what kind of person I am." "And what kind of person are you, Sarah?" I asked quietly. The silence stretched between us like a chasm that could never be bridged. 2 months after the foundation's launch, Sarah arrived at my door for what I sensed would be our final conversation. Gone was the desperate, pleading daughter who had spent weeks trying to manipulate me back into compliance. In her place stood a woman whose mask had finally slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "I'm done, Mum," she announced, as she pushed past me into my living room. "I'm done pretending that this is about anything other than your spite. I'm done acting like you're the victim in this situation." I closed the door quietly and followed her, noting how she stood rather than sat, a physical manifestation of the distance that now existed between us. "I'm listening," I said simply. "You want to know what really happened in that hospital?" Sarah's voice was sharp, brittle. "Yes, I said those words to Dr. Morrison. But not because I wanted you to die, because I was terrified of watching you suffer through a prolonged, painful decline that would destroy whatever dignity you had left." I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine emotion beneath the anger. "And yet you said I had lived long enough. Not that you were worried about my suffering, but that I had simply reached the end of my useful existence." "Fine." Sarah threw her hands up in exasperation. Maybe I phrased it badly. Maybe I was thinking about the practical realities of the situation. Maybe I was considering what a long recovery would mean for all of us, not just you. "The practical realities," I repeated slowly, "such as the inconvenience of caring for an aging parent, the financial burden of potential long-term care, the disruption to your comfortable lifestyle. Don't you dare make me sound like a monster. I have my own family to think about, my own responsibilities. I can't drop everything to become your full-time caregiver just because you've decided to punish me for one moment of honesty." "One moment of honesty," I mused. Yes, I suppose that's exactly what it was. A moment when your real feelings slipped out, unfiltered by the pretense you usually maintain. Sarah began pacing around my living room, her expensive heels clicking against the hardwood floors I had refinished myself 15 years ago. "You know what? You're absolutely right. I don't want to spend the next 20 years watching you deteriorate. I don't want to sacrifice my prime earning years to manage your medical appointments and dietary restrictions and mobility issues. I want to live my own life, build my own wealth, secure my own family's future. At least now you're being honest." "Yes, I'm being honest. And you know what else I'm being honest about? This foundation, this charity work, it's not about helping people. It's about revenge. You're not a saint, Mom. You're a bitter old woman who got her feelings hurt and decided to take it out on her only child." I walked to my mantelpiece and picked up one of the many thank you cards I had received from foundation recipients. "Would you like to hear what Amanda wrote to me? She's the teacher whose childcare costs we covered." I don't care what. She said that our grant allowed her to complete her master's degree, which led to a promotion that increased her salary by $8,000 per year. She said that her children will grow up seeing that hard work and education are valued, and that sometimes unexpected help comes from people who understand struggle. I set the card down and picked up another. Or perhaps you'd prefer to hear from Marcus, not your husband, but Marcus Williams, a single father whose ex-wife abandoned their 3 children. Our emergency grant covered his rent when he lost his job, preventing his family from becoming homeless. Stop it. These aren't strangers, Sarah. These are people whose lives have been fundamentally changed by the money you believe belongs to you. Money I earned through decades of work, sacrifice, and careful saving. Sarah's composure finally cracked completely. It was my future. I planned my life around that inheritance. I made financial decisions based on the assumption that the money would eventually be mine. And there's the truth we've been dancing around for months, I said quietly. You didn't love me. You loved my money. You didn't visit me in the hospital because you were worried about my health. You visited because you needed to maintain the appearance of being a dutiful daughter until I died and left you everything. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you visited me when you didn't need something? When was the last time you called just to talk, not to ask for money or favors or free childcare? When was the last time you showed any genuine interest in my life, my thoughts, my experiences? Sarah's silence was answer enough. The foundation has shown me what genuine gratitude looks like, I continued. It's shown me what it feels like to help people who appreciate assistance rather than expect it. It's shown me the difference between giving from love and giving from obligation. So that's it then? Sarah's voice was barely controlled. 35 years of being your daughter, and you're throwing it all away because of one conversation you overheard? I'm not throwing anything away, Sarah. I'm simply responding to what you showed me about the true nature of our relationship. You made it clear that you view me as a burden, whose death would be more convenient than my continued life. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. A life without the complications of an aging mother. And what about my children? What about your grandchildren? What about them? You've already demonstrated that you're comfortable using them as pawns in your manipulation campaign. They'll be fine with parents who can afford $8,000 vacations and BMWs and houses in Clifton. Sarah stood still for a long moment, and I could see her calculating whether there was any argument left that might change my mind. Finally, she picked up her handbag and walked toward the door. I hope you're happy, Mom. I hope your precious charity work fills the hole where your family used to be. It already has, I replied truthfully. After she left, I sat in my quiet house and realized that for the first time in 35 years, I felt completely free. 6 months later, I stood in the Bristol Community Center, surrounded by 47 women and children whose lives had been touched by the Helen Brooks Foundation. The room buzzed with conversation and laughter as single mothers shared their success stories. Their children played together, and a genuine community formed around our shared experiences of struggle and resilience. Dr. Patel approached me with the quarterly report, her face glowing with satisfaction. Helen, the impact statistics are remarkable. We've provided emergency assistance to 68 families, funded 12 women through professional certification programs, and prevented 19 families from losing their housing. The ripple effects are extraordinary. Margaret Foster joined us, carrying a thick folder of new applications. We're receiving requests from across the Southwest now. Women are hearing about the foundation through word of mouth, through social services, through local newspapers. We're going to need to establish regional offices to handle the demand. I looked around the room at faces that had become dear to me over the past months. There was Amanda, the teacher, now working as a vice principal and mentoring other single mothers in her school district. There was Lisa, the nurse, who had used her stable employment to save for a house deposit and was now a homeowner for the first time. There was Jennifer, a young mother who had used our childcare grant to complete her nursing degree and was now working at the same hospital where I had fought for my life. Mrs. Brooks, Jennifer approached me with her 18-month-old daughter in her arms. I wanted you to meet Lucy. She's walking now, and her first steps were taken in the flat we could afford because of your foundation. As I held little Lucy, I marveled at how different this felt from holding my own grandchildren. There was no expectation here, no calculation of future benefits or inherited obligations. Just pure gratitude from a young mother who understood the value of unexpected help. The local television news crew arrived to film a segment about the foundation's success, and the reporter asked me the question I had been expecting for months. Mrs. Brooks, our research shows that you established this foundation by disinheriting your own daughter. Some viewers might wonder if you ever regret that decision. I looked directly into the camera, thinking about all the people watching who might be struggling with their own family disappointments and financial sacrifices. I regret many things, I said honestly. I regret that it took a near-death experience to show me how little my own daughter valued my life. I regret that I spent 35 years enabling entitled behavior instead of teaching genuine gratitude. I regret that I didn't discover the joy of meaningful charitable work decades earlier. I paused, holding Lucy's tiny hand as she babbled happily in my arms. But I don't regret redirecting my resources toward people who understand their value. Every penny that might have funded luxury vacations and designer handbags is now creating genuine security and opportunity for families who will never take it for granted. Later that evening, alone in my house, I reflected on the transformation of the past year. My health had never been better. The stress of maintaining false relationships had lifted, replaced by the energizing work of genuine purpose. My days were filled with foundation business, volunteer work, and meaningful connections with people who shared my values. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. To my surprise, it was one of my grandsons. "Grandma Helen?" James's 8-year-old voice was tentative, uncertain. "Mummy said I shouldn't call you, but I wanted to ask you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" "At school, they're talking about your foundation. My teacher said you help children like me, children whose mummies don't have enough money. Is that true?" I felt my heart constrict with emotion. "Yes, darling, that's true. But we have enough money, don't we? Mummy drives a fancy car, and we go on expensive holidays. Yes, you do have enough money. Then why is Mummy so upset about your foundation? Why doesn't she want you to help children who need help more than we do?" From the mouths of babes, my 8-year-old grandson had grasped something that his mother, with all her education and advantages, refused to understand. Sometimes, James, people get confused about what's really important. They think that money they've never earned belongs to them, instead of being grateful for what they already have. "I think what you're doing is good, Grandma Helen." I told my teacher that I'm proud my grandma helps people. After hanging up, I realized that my grandson's words represented the greatest victory of all. Despite his mother's attempts to turn him against me, he had recognized the value of what I was doing. Perhaps the next generation would understand what this one had failed to grasp. As I prepared for bed, I looked at the framed photograph on my bedside table. Not a family photo, but a picture from the Foundation's first community dinner. Dozens of women and children, all smiling, all grateful, all representing the family I had chosen rather than the family I had been born into. My name is Helen Brooks. I'm 61 years old, and I live in Bristol, England. A year ago, I nearly died in a hospital bed while my daughter wished for my death. Today, I am more alive than I have ever been, surrounded by people who understand that love must be earned and gratitude must be genuine. The money Sarah lost has found its way to people who truly need it, and my legacy will be measured not in what I gave to ungrateful relatives, but in what I gave to a community of women who turned their appreciation into action. I hope my story inspires you to examine your own relationships and consider whether your love and resources are being invested wisely. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to redirect our energy toward people who truly deserve it. Thank you for following my journey. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about family, resilience, and the courage to make difficult choices. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love hearing from viewers around the world who understand that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to enable ungrateful behavior. Remember, family is not just about blood relations, but about the people who truly value your presence in their lives.